Guanajuato, from Leon campus, from the Ibero-American University. Good morning. We would like to ask you, how convenient is it, the fact that the formal leader becomes a facilitator? Is that convenient for the regular boss to become a facilitator?
Well, I would like to believe I'd like to believe that all of our bosses have the skills and ability to do that. What I recognize that usually our bosses are good at being bosses or good at being good managers and don't have the facilitating skills. I think that a good manager or a good boss will recognize that what they need is somebody to come in and really facilitate what goes on in the groups that they're working with. It's very difficult to facilitate and work in the group itself, and I think that that's important for managers and bosses to recognize.
And now we have the a training center from Guadalajara. When you have several projects going on and several teams, then you have several facilitators because one is not enough, obviously. Well, my question is, how can we really get them up to par right in a fast way, because the projects cannot be delayed, cannot be sitting there waiting? How can we speed the process up a little bit?
I think it's important to have a core group of individuals or facilitators that can work with the groups. I think that as you're going through the process of training facilitators, and there are ways you can do that in a short period of time, but to allow teams to work on their own when you have a facilitator moving in and out of the groups. I don't believe you have to have a facilitator with the group every moment of the working day. You have to have someone there that can sort of make sure, give process checks to individuals that are working, and actually one facilitator working with several groups can actually have an intern watching what he or she is doing in the process, so that you can actually train people as the facilitators are working with others.
From Morelia, Michoacán. Good morning. The question is, before initiating the activity of facilitator, what are the most important challenges that the facilitator has to consider before undertaking his task?
Well, one, I think the first thing is whether the facilitator wants to do the job. And the second is that whether the facilitator has the ability to do it well. And I believe that the third, I think the facilitator really has to consider the amount of time that the person is going to spend doing the work. And if they can make a commitment based on their own knowledge base and their skill base and their willingness to do it, then I think those three things are really key, because what the facilitator is able to do is to give him or herself to the group and work well with them as they move through the process of their work.
The next question comes from Mexicali via phone from the University of Baja. For the formation of a work team, is it necessary to have any employee or only top-level management people?
I would encourage both. I think that the one thing that we recognize is that decisions that are made at the lowest level are probably the best decisions in terms of production or in terms of what goes on in organizations. I would give people an opportunity at all levels in order to form groups. And if you haven't, if you can do them simultaneously with management as well as non-management employees, it serves to model out a way of operating that people have a tendency of watching their bosses, and if their bosses are doing something that they'll follow. So I encourage doing it at all levels and simultaneously if you can.
The next question comes from Mexico again, from the Technological Institute. Is it possible to have a teamwork if you only do it on the operation line and on intermediate levels and not high levels, top levels?
Yes, I think there are different ways that individuals approach doing this, and often what you really need is a champion in the organization in order to do team do teams and to make sure team building works. The champions can come at any level. Many organizations we have champions that come in from mid-level, or we have champions that come on the line or operations. Are they committed to doing it? Yes, and they have a willingness to make sure it works. They can do it at all levels. Right? The key is to have someone that's willing to really do it and work through the process of putting teams together and making them work.
We have one more question, and this is coming from the National Autonomous University from Mexico, from the Federal District. Good morning. Good morning. How can you encourage the teamwork when in an organization they're emphasizing individual work? We're calling from some places. There are two calls in one. There is an interference here, but we thank you very much for all your questions, and we are going to repeat. The next question comes from the Autonomous University from Mexico, the Federal. How can you encourage teamwork, when the culture of the country itself is based on individual work? How can you promote something that goes against with the culture of the country?
This is a good question. I think one of the first questions you have to ask when you're doing this process is that what are all the barriers that you have to work through in order to make it work? And I think the first question you have to ask is, does the culture support teamwork or people working together? Sometimes people don't ask that question, and what happens is that the very thing that you're trying to achieve, that is success from people working together, never begins because of the nature of how the culture that people are in and what they do. So I think the first question you have to ask in whatever country that you are trying to do this in is, does the culture support teamwork, that is people working together, that is people being rewarded together, or does it support individual contribution and reward? If you have individual contribution and reward, and you're trying to work in teams, you're going to find that you're going to have difficulty immediately.
Thank you, Dr. Torres. Let us continue with Module 2, where Dr. Torres will speak about the importance of team leadership and the concept of the Tao of teams.
The next topic that I will discuss is team leadership. It is one of the most important aspects of the team development process. It is one that affects all of us regardless of our position on the team. The principles of traditional models of leadership are power, authority, and subordinate control. These leadership principles that were once effective now hinder team members' ability to self-authorize team leaders. Self-authorized team leadership is a form of accountable followership in which team members assume responsibility for their performance and their relationships with other team members. Self-authorized leadership is based on 4 assumptions. 1, all team members practice some degree of leadership. 2, self-authorized leadership is applicable to all team members. 3, not all team members are effective leaders. And 4, self-authorized leadership can be developed. To be successful, self-authorized leaders employ 2 types of strategies that serve to direct their development and performance: behavioral strategies and cognitive strategies. Behavioral strategies are self-directed action efforts that direct team member performance to excellence. The strategies are as follows. Self-imposed outcomes. Self-imposed outcomes help establish direction and priority. They are the most important component of self-authorized leadership. They focus on personal growth and professional development. Self-imposed outcomes must be clear, challenging, and attainable. Self-management of workplace behaviors. Self-management of workplace behaviors helps Model appropriate methods for interaction between team members. Behaviors can be preferred and supported or unwanted and inhibited. Self-observation of outcomes. Self-observation of outcomes focuses on the consequences of completed tasks. Observation of what worked and what didn't work are helpful in determining future efforts. Self-rewards. Self-rewards are important reinforcers for preferred behaviors. They can be both physical or psychological. They serve to reward effort and maintain high levels of motivation. Cognitive strategies focus on the naturally rewarding aspects of teamwork. 4 strategies that promote a positive attitude toward teamwork are as follows. Self-knowledge. Self-knowledge means knowing that you have an awareness and understanding of the range of information you need to do your job. Skills. Skills means knowing that you have the expertise that comes from training and practice. Self-control. Self-control means knowing that you have some control over what happens on the job. Purpose. Purpose means knowing that your work is meaningful with a specific end in view. Self-authorized team leaders who want to increase their effectiveness as team members can do so by using the following strategies. Maintaining an outcome orientation, focusing attention, leading others by example, and balancing the mind and the heart. Maintaining an outcome orientation, just like the facilitator skills I previously discussed, allows self-authorized team leaders to see their experiences as a set of choices. Rather than addressing the issue of why a problem exists, it organizes experience around what is wanted and how it becomes possible to achieve it. When a specific outcome is decided upon, it becomes possible to turn those examples of not getting what you want into valuable feedback. You no longer fail at your endeavors, but learn from your experiences. Focusing attention refers to the ability to have a clear set of goals and priorities that result from maintaining an outcome orientation. A person who is able to focus attention knows where they are going and doesn't waste precious time getting there. Leading others by example is the golden rule of self-authorized team leadership. It refers to modeling appropriate behaviors such as respecting, supporting, listening, communicating, collaborating, and being sensitive to the needs of all team members. Balancing the mind and the heart allows self-authorized team leaders to engage both the subjective and analytical thinking processes of the mind. The goal is to create a balance or alignment between how we feel and think, which is necessary if we are going to be working effectively with other team members. An effective approach to empowering self-authorized team leaders is the adherence to the 7 pillars of leadership character. The 7 pillars are values that serve as a foundation for effective self-authorized team leadership. The 7 pillars that form the foundation are caring, courage, honesty, integrity, responsibility, loyalty, and fairness. Caring is the ability to show others that you care about them, their kindness, generosity, sharing compassion. Courage is the attitude or response of facing and dealing with anything recognized as dangerous, difficult, or painful, instead of withdrawing from it. Honesty is the willingness to be truthful and sincere without deceiving or misleading others or withholding important information in relationships of trust. Integrity is the ability to stand up for your own beliefs about right and wrong and show commitment, courage, and self-discipline in everyday team member interactions. Responsibility is the ability to think before you act, giving consideration to the possible consequences of your interactions, as well as exercising self-control and self-discipline. Loyalty is a willingness to stand by and support other team members without talking behind people's backs or spreading rumors or engaging in harmful gossip. Fairness is the ability to treat all team members alike without prejudging and making decisions only on appropriate considerations. Self-authorized team leadership is a concept that places the responsibility of leadership on the shoulder of each team member. As team members assume responsibility for their actions and relationships with others, they share leadership responsibilities in all aspects of the team's work. This is true shared leadership. The final area of my discussion is more philosophical, yet it incorporates all of what I have previously discussed about team facilitators and team leaders. To be a successful team member, facilitator, or leader, we must become aware of the need for balance within ourselves and our environment. We must be able to explore the power within ourselves and create true meaning in our work and in our own lives. In essence, we must know who we are as individuals, experience life fully, understand the limits of our own personal power, strive to direct events without using force, lead others by example, allow people to manage themselves, practice the least complex things in life, and recognize that every journey of discovery begins with the first step. The Tao of team power penetrates the elusive notion of power possessed by each team member so that each person can contribute in a synergistic way to the team and the organization. It allows each person to align with the forces in nature, recognizing that to be at odds with nature's way stifles creativity, learning, and growth. An awareness of the patterns in nature can bring us insights into parallel patterns of human behavior. Just as spring follows winter, growth follows repression in society. Just as too much gravity will collapse a star, too much possessiveness will collapse an idea. When team members feel powerless, they react negatively. When pushed to the extreme, they feel fear. And when they are fearful for a long time, they feel hopeless and that all may be lost. The result is that the team and the organization will fail. On the other hand, powerful team members never need to show their power, yet others pay attention to them. Those who radiate the force do so with the intuitive knowledge that by allowing the force of the Tao to move through them, they in turn will receive the same energy in a different form. The more you act as a conductor, the more power you will be that will be returned to you. True power in teams is the ability to influence without effort. Powerful team members influence others by example and by modeling behaviors that contribute to overall team effectiveness. Within teams, powerful people have great presence. They influence those who come into contact with them by simply being present. Team members who can relate to the universal force of the Tao are actively engaged in defining and redefining their personal reality and their own existence. This is the force behind the Tao of team power. The Tao has been described as a unified force field that reveals a basic oneness of the universe. It has been suggested that all changes in the universe are the result of the interaction between the polar opposites, yin, the negative forces, and yang, the positive forces. Activity in the Tao is a continuous interplay between these forces. Change in the universe occurs not as a result of one strong force acting on something or someone else, but rather as a result of a tendency that is natural in all things and situations. Change is natural. Using force is unnatural. Movement within the Tao is not directive. It occurs naturally and spontaneously. Since unified force activity is the Tao's principle of action, spontaneity should be a highly rewarded characteristic of all team interactions. Acting in harmony with the universe means acting according to your values and beliefs. It means trusting your intuitive intelligence, which is innate to you, just as the laws of change are innate in all things around us. If one refrains from acting contrary to nature or from going against the grain of things, one is in harmony with the Tao, and thus your actions will always be successful. So I would like to read some selected passages of the Tao of Teams to emphasize the importance of respecting and working with each other as team members. The first is harmony and growth. Do not praise one over another, and team members will not strive in opposition. Do not indulge in wishful thinking, and team members' minds will remain focused. Evolved team members know that attitudes speak louder than words, that self-respect is a motivating force, that valuing integrity builds loyalty, that flexibility creates a deep trust, that spontaneity creates team energy. Let team members act without direction. Let them act with direction. Activity with direction and without direction creates order from chaos. This is the way to maintain harmony and create growth on the team. The second passage, the nature of team power. The Tao is constant, yet it is never seen nor touched. It is intense at times and others not. It is profound. It harmonizes and balances. Although it is never used up, it is always being used. It directs the way of the team energy. The Tao of team power changes and evolves. It redefines and transforms. It guides team members to achieve and succeed as one. This is the true nature of team power. The next passage, acting without self-interest. The Tao and the earth are everlasting. They exist as one, yet separately. Because they are different, they can exist together, one before the other before the one. It is natural to be first, and it is natural to be last. This is the way of the Tao. When evolved team members put themselves last, they will be first. When they put themselves outside, they will be the first to be brought back inside. Position in the flow occurs without force, and it endures. This is how acting without self-interest helps the team succeed. The next passage, using the team's field. Energy appears but cannot be seen. It is sensed but cannot be touched. It creates movement but cannot be judged. It is ever present but always elusive. The silence creates the team field. It is spirit and energy moving back and forth. It is time and space that cannot be tracked. For success, absence must be created, and it is this absence that must be resolved. When the team's force is focused, critical mass develops. When force is diffused, energy is lost. Evolved team members know to use the force that is present by making use of what is not. This is the power when using the team's field. The next passage, acting naturally. Strive to be natural, and freedom will occur. Be open and a part of all things, and the source of all things will set you free. To comprehend the source is called knowledge. To have knowledge of the source is called insight. To have insight of the source is called destiny. A team member's destiny lies in striving to be whole, in striving to be free, in striving to be one with the team. Evolved team members act naturally. They know the Tao. The next passage, attitude is a steady force. In nature, the thunder shower lasts a short time. The trembling of the earth only a few moments. If the earth cannot sustain these forces without responding, how can team members sustain force without reacting? In the Tao, belligerent movement toward one's goals has little effect. Confrontation yields resistance. Harmony yields a positive attitude. The team member who is steady understands the Tao, who admits to failure knows success, who comprehends self recognizes reality, who knows that what one believes one becomes, and contributes powerfully to the team. Attitude is a steady team member force. The next passage, leadership is harmony. Team leaders in harmony with the Tao know themselves. They sense the rhythmic interactions of the team. Team leaders in harmony with the Tao make team connections. They are all attained through self-awareness. When team leaders identify with team members, they reciprocate. When team leaders gain power from the team members share responsibility. When team leaders are incorruptible, team members offer support. Effective team leadership is a cohesive harmony. The next passage, understanding polarity. The Absolute, standing outside of time and space, produced the Tao. The Tao produced the One, temporal reality. The One produced the two, positive and negative charges. The two produced the three, matter, energy, and the laws that hold them together. These three things tell us all there is to know about the universe. They are a blending that brings harmony. Evolved team leaders know that everything in the universe is interconnected and interdependent. This is the origin of the behavior of polarity. When one thing decreases, something else increases. Thus, to lead, team leaders must follow. To direct, team leaders must take direction. To endure, team leaders must not put themselves above others. Team leaders must understand polarity. The next passage, a non-confrontational stance. A river seeks the path of least resistance and acts without action. A river meets formidable obstacles and finds its way without effort. With little struggle, the river reaches its goal. Evolved team members influence without confronting, direct without controlling, take action without meeting resistance. Team members must seek a non-confrontational stance. Kindness must be the first virtue. The Tao's force is great. Some call it inconceivable, others call it significant. There are those who understand the Tao, and there are those who do not. For those who know the Tao, it teaches many things, but three things stand out: kindness, gentleness, and daring not to be last. With kindness, one becomes noble. With gentleness, one becomes strong. Daring not to be last makes one's first. If one of the three is done without the others, the action is doomed. Kindness must be a team member's first virtue. The next passage, maintaining appropriate respect. When the team no longer fears authority, it signals the approach of a greater power. Successful team members show the leaders respect. The leaders return it. Evolved team members minimize the distance between leaders and followers. Focus on and give and take authority. Model the behaviors of leaders. Team members maintain appropriate respect. Another passage directing the Tao's power. In the world, the Tao acts like a bent bow. When the bow is used, both ends bend toward the middle in perfect balance. The bow self-adjusts for excess and deficiency. In nature, the Tao acts like the bow. It reduces the excess and adds to the deficient. Those who follow the Tao understand nature's tendency to balance extremes. Dominant species succumb to the most fragile. Overcharged particles seek less charged particles for balance. Individuals who attempt to dominate are neutralized. Who can use this information to serve others? Those who acknowledge the Tao. Evolved team members direct the Tao's power. Another passage, greater success. Most difficulties that team members experience are the result of reactions to larger issues. Knowing what a problem is does not resolve it. Knowing why the problems exist does not provide answers for it. Just knowing what and why only leads to failure. The result is a limited experience. Evolved team members move toward outcomes and ask, what do I want? Move toward developing strategies and ask, how can things be different? Move toward using information as valuable feedback and ask, what have I learned? Move toward resolution and ask, what possibilities exist for the future? Team members with outcome paradigms have greater success. If you are ever in doubt about what you should do next, just remember, just Tao it. In conclusion, we strive to make our teams the best by empowering our people to be the best that they can be. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Torres. Now we have the second question and answer session. Here we have the first question that is coming via fax, coming from Paraguay, Industrial Union of Paraguay. And it says, what is the difference in role between the facilitator and the moderator?
I think it's a real good question. Armando and I have been talking about that. The facilitator is one who manages the process from beginning to ending, and where you have a moderator who is the somewhat spokesperson for the group at any one point in time. Very clear differences. Again, the facilitator is the one that works the group through all the dynamics that the group goes through and challenges and pushes the team forward in order to be successful.
Second question is coming from via fax, and it's coming from Mexico. The vet in zoology faculty, School of Vet. In Latin America in general, teamwork doesn't really work. In your experience, what factors do you think affect interdisciplinary work?
I think the first factor is whether or not, and I'll go back to this issue around culture, is whether or not the culture supports people working together, or people sharing leadership, or people being rewarded for what they do as individuals or as group members. In different cultures, in Mexico, for example, leadership is very different in terms of how people look toward their leaders and respect their leaders. So there's a very difference in how we look at how leaders manage groups and how groups respect their leaders, which is very different from, for example, North America, where shared leadership is a much more, it's an easier concept for people to work through because people have different ideas and opinions that they can share with others.
La siguiente pregunta nos viene de Villahermosa,
second question is coming from Villahermosa, Tabasco, and it's from Pemex. Good morning. Our question is as follows. We have to introducing the concept of teamwork. Can it be facilitated when the teams have already lost interest in loyalty because their leaders have not shown that? They have not been an example of that. What would you do given that when you see people who are not loyal to that, who are not faithful to their own teamwork and their leaders?
I think the issue of trust is, and we talked about this a little earlier, is that trust is key to developing support for and commitment to the team. I've worked in organizations where there was a talked about commitment to working on teams, but the leaders never really followed through or showed a willingness to make a commitment to doing it because they acted differently. The only thing that happened as a result of that, it was very difficult for team members to be to re-engage in the process of team building and team development and working as groups. They're very difficult to do that once the individuals lose trust with their leaders.
Ahora vamos a interactuar con Sinaloa, Mazatlán.
Okay, now we're interacting with Mazatlan. This is from Sinaloa. The question is, the leader generates ideas, or does the team generate the ideas? Who generates the ideas?
Well, I think when we talk about synergy, which is the concept of people contributing and the ideas being greater than the sum of the contributors, is that a good leader will allow people in the group to contribute as much as possible, recognizing that all the ideas are very important ideas, and that anyone moving the group forward at any moment in time is sharing leadership. It doesn't mean that the leader gives that up. It means that there is a shared leadership among the group.
The next question is coming from SECAP in Mexico, DF, Federal District. Good morning. Good morning. According to the positive and negative forces that you mentioned, where do you locate the difference between these? Do you work to live or do you live to work? Or what force do you think is that? Where do you locate man as an individual? In which one of these forces or tendencies? That's a good question.
I'm going to answer that for myself. I mean, do I live to work or do I work to live? I think there are really times when I have to philosophically think about that. Again, let's talk culture. Culture says that we support, we provide for our family, or we work for ourselves individually. And again, the cultures are very different around that. The whole notion of family is very important in some cultures, and it's not in others, whereas the individual is primary in some cultures and it's not in others. I've been fortunate enough to have both sides of that to think about and select from in terms of how I work.
Estaremos ahora en Acapulco, Guerrero.
We now have a call from Acapulco.
Bienvenidos.
Sí, buenos días.
Welcome.
Habla el ingeniero Alejandro Ramos Osorio.
My name is Alejandro Ramos, and I have a question for you. Within a union where you have different ideologies and political tendencies that very often are generally antagonistic, how can you implement successfully a teamwork leadership?
The issue of politics is one that we haven't discussed, but I think it's key because there are allegiances that people have to different leaders, and that if there is conflict between the leaders, then the allegiances that the team members would have will be for the leaders. It's a difficult task, and it's one of the issues that you really have to think about when you're putting teams together that might be cross-functional teams, for example. Where do the team members hold their allegiance to what leader? And are they willing to work together to move beyond the allegiance that they have? It's a very difficult question, and I call it politics for participation, and it's one thing that we really have to pay attention to if we're trying to make teams work.
Next
question comes from Coahuila, from Ibero-American University in Mexico. Good morning. The traditional enterprises encourage